So the first Guild Wars 2 public beta event started this weekend, and I got to have my first hands-on time with the game. And I thought, now that the event is over, I would sit down, do a quick little review of what the beta was like. It's not a finished project or anything, but, you know, it is what it is right now, and I thought I would review what it currently is. Now, to start off, the background video is the end of beta weekend event that was going on, which includes fighting a giant rabbit of death, and a few pissed off black moas, and even an ice dragon from the huge server that I was in. Now, if the FPS drops dramatically at one point or another, it's simply because of what I'm going to talk about in a bit, which is the unoptimization of the graphics, and my graphics my FPS just dropped down to 3 at one point. It never went below 3, but it did drop down to 3 several times. More often than not, it would drop down to like 4 to 7 in most fights, but in one particular big fight, it did drop down to 3. Yeah, now that that's out of the way, I thought I would cover my background of Guild Wars before I actually go on to the review. I played Guild Wars 1, I had beaten all the campaigns but Nightfall, put about 500 plus hours into the game. I forget the exact amount, but it is over 500. I own 2 of the 3 books. I think there's a 3rd book at least. I haven't read them yet, but I do own 2 of the books. One of them I won in a Massively.com contest. Alright, so starting off, we have gameplay. I'm just going to be reviewing my thoughts on the gameplay, as well as the graphics and sound effects, and then an overall recap. So, in terms of leveling, this is a big thing in most MMOs. Most MMOs you level up by fighting monsters, and then you turn in quests, and that's a decent amount of XP, but the most of the XP you get comes from turning in quests. Now in Guild Wars 1, this was actually the reverse. Most of your XP came from killing, or from turning in quests, and very little of it came from monsters. And the same has been transitioned over into Guild Wars 2. You get a little bit of XP from killing monsters, but you don't get a lot of it. Most of your XP is definitely coming in from turning in quests. And I like this a lot. It allows the creators to scale the content so that you have a linear progression curve versus a dramatically increasing curve, which you have in most video games, which is where the term grind comes from. You go in most MMOs, you will typically play through the beginning zones very, very fast, and then it just slows down progressively over time, and to the point where you have to grind for hours on end just to make a level. In this game, that is not the case. Leveling comes very, very fast, and I noticed this in the beta. I leveled up basically the amount of time it took me to get from 1 to 2 is what it took me to get from 19 to 20, and 20 is the max level I hit. So it is a very linear leveling curve, and I really like that. And one thing the system allows them to do is to actually down level your character. So if I'm level 20 and I go to a level 7 zone, it's going to down level me down to 7, and I'm going to get the same amount of XP as I would as if I was playing that zone at level 7. So that allows you to go back and play some lower end content. It's really nice. I really, really like this. And transitioning from that, we have dynamic events, which is how you get most of your XP in the game, aside from the main storyline quest. And this is sort of what ArenaNet was trying to do with do away with questing in Guild Wars 2. They didn't want you to go from NPC to NPC, from quest line to quest line, just doing quests. It's like this for your storyline quests because that makes sense, but in terms of questing for XP and all that, that doesn't make a lot of sense at all. And it was done simply because developers didn't know how to do anything better until ArenaNet just decided to sit down and figure it out. So how dynamic events work is you explore an area, and the quests will come to you. You don't have to explore, you don't have to look for quests. You roam around an area, maybe kill things, loot, gather any of that, and just quests will start appearing everywhere, and you can go and pick and choose whatever ones you want to do. And I really like what you can do in dynamic events, because they're quite dynamic. They're not just go kill 10 minotaurs. They can be, maybe the cows need water, so you fill up buckets with water, and then fill up their touches, or toshes, whatever they're called, with water so they can drink. A dynamic event could be as simple as that, or they can be as dynamic as what I had at one point, which was a group of rogue, I think they were Rogue Char, had taken over a mine, and I needed to go to the mine because there was a person there who had favor, and I'll talk about this in a second, or honor, or karma, whatever you want to call it. And I wanted to go to this person to fill it up. So, but I couldn't because that person was dead because their camp was invaded, and everyone who invaded it killed all the inhabitants. So the quest was to kill their tunnels because they were tunneling race, and their tunnels allowed them to respawn in great amounts. So it was to kill all 7 tunnels and then completely clear them out of the city. Now, I was the only person here because this was a relatively high-level zone. Most people were just constantly making alternative characters, alts, and leveling up through the 1 to 10 zones. I was around level 20 at this point in time. So it was all about myself. So this dynamic event popped up. I needed to go here. So this was simply because I wanted to be here, and my whole goal was to clear this village out of the enemies. So what did I do? I destroyed all of their tunnels so they couldn't respawn. Then I just started systematically reviving every villager that was killed, and ended up creating a large army of NPC villagers. And then I just counterattacked the leader of this group that attacked the mines, and ended up retaking the village, and that was the dynamic event. Now, it even gets more complex than that, because I was by myself there. There are dynamic quest chains that can encompass almost entire zones. I mean, I love what ArenaNet did with these dynamic events. It's an awesome concept. I was very skeptical going into it, but it's very fun. It makes the gameplay very fluid, and I'm very, very pleased with what they did here. And I'm just a heads up. I'm sorry if this video is going to go rather long. There was a lot to talk about here. There's a lot to cover. Now, as for the karma that I mentioned, basically, each zone has a certain amount of hearts in it, and the hearts are not full; they're blank. And what you do is when you go near a zone with a heart, there was a heart in this mine that I was talking about that I wanted to get, it will tell you that there is a list of things you need to do to fill up that heart. And these can be killing things. These can range from killing things to maybe scaring something out of the territory. I found one which was entirely about gathering to stop bugs from feeding on the weeds, and you wouldn't even kill the bugs. You would just drop a thing that would make the bugs want to not be there. It would sort of scare them away from the area. It could be a lot of different things like that. Even, like I said, filling up the water tushes for the cows to drink from. So you do a whole bunch of these events, or a whole bunch of these things, and dynamic events also count towards these. And when the heart is full, you can talk to the karma vendor, which is where the heart is represented. And for doing these events and doing these dynamic events, you get karma. And the karma could be used just to buy vendor items from these people. And that is basically how you get gear in this game. Because of how dynamic events work, you don't get gear from them. You don't turn them in and get gear. You only get gear from storyline quests. So they needed to create some sort of an ulterior way to get gear. And that's how you do it. You do it by getting karma, then you trade in the karma for gear. So that's basically how the karma system works. That's why I wanted to get to the karma guys, because I had like 700 spare karma. That was easily a chess piece or something like that. And I wanted to get to the karma vendor there because I knew he had something for me to buy that I wanted to buy. So, yeah, so everything just sort of works really, really well together. Now, there's so much to talk about in terms of just the gameplay. I didn't get to do everything. So, I think I'm just going to transition over to PvP now, and then call it that. I'll cover more if I do another video with the next PV, or the next beta event. So in terms of PvP, I did a little bit of World versus World, and I did one PvP match, which was like 10 versus 10, I think. So in the PvP match I did, the gameplay was very solid. It came down to where if you had one bad person on a team who didn't know what they were doing, the team lost, and that was very evident in the case of our enemies. They had someone who had no clue what they were doing. And everyone on my team had probably played Guild Wars 1 before, and we had a roughly good idea what we were doing. And we just completely stomped the enemy team, but the gameplay was very solid all throughout that. And I've had my friend who came from World of Warcraft and Star Wars The Old Republic PvP background, absolutely fell in love with the combat. He played on my friend's account, and he just loved it. He didn't think he would like it, but he liked it. It's very fluid. The controls are very responsive when it comes to PvP. Dodging actually makes more sense in PvP because skills are telegraphed a lot better. Everything just seems to work, and everyone seems to have a role. You know, Guardians hold points very well. Engineers hold points very well. The map we played on had a center tower point, and after I helped capture it, actually after I captured it, I was the only one who captured it. I stayed there until an engineer popped up, and he put 3 turrets down and was sitting there defending it by himself against up to 3 people at a time. He did his role very, very well. He knew how to play his role, and he just defended that point like a boss. The enemy team had one very good Guardian who kept giving me trouble on one of the points, and we had some pretty epic duels until the rest of his team appeared and killed me at that point. But yeah, the PvP in terms of the matchmaking one just felt very, very good. I'm really looking forward to the next beta event because I plan to delve it more into PvP then. I didn't delve into it enough here. I wanted to get through the storyline, and I didn't want to, spend... there are people reporting, like, playing 40 or 50 straight hours, and I didn't want to do that. I couldn't do that. That would drive me insane. So I played for, like, I think 20 or so hours total. 22 maybe, something like that. And that was mostly through doing the story quest and getting to level 20. Now, in terms of the world PvP, this was interesting. It was basically a very long skirmish. Like, I don't think world PvP ever ends. I think it goes on for a day and then it ends at the end of the day. I think that's how world PvP works, the best of my knowledge right now. But what happened was I was sitting there for like 40 minutes. We were on this one little point, and what would happen would be we'd push up to the enemy's front gates. We're at the very center of the map. We'd push up to their front gates, and then they would push us back, and then they would push us to our front gates, and then we would push them to their front gates. And this went back and forth like 6 times, and I just said screw it and left at that point because nothing was happening. It was fun, but it was more or less just people keep pushing each other back to these other gates. It was like there's nothing happening here. I had seen people sieging, and we couldn't siege them. It was like literally the entire group, 100 people versus 100 people in this one little enclosed area, just pushing back and forth. It was really retarded, and what was happening. And I wish I'd seen a better representation of World versus World, but I got a really bad representation from here. So that's another reason why I want to really delve into PvP in the next beta event. It's just World versus World specifically. I got a really bad impression from here. I did not like. It was fun, but it got really repetitive, really fast, and we were only moving about 50 yards. Like it would be 50 yards towards their base, and then 50 yards towards our base, and then just back and forth, and it. Yeah, so I can't really talk much about World versus World or PvP for that matter. So I just thought I would bring up my experience with it up until this point. But yeah, overall the gameplay was pretty solid in PvE content. I'm pretty certain PvP in terms of like skirmishes is really, really fun. But the World versus World I'm currently skeptical of. I'll have to try it more in detail next beta event. Moving on to graphics, artistically the game looks amazing. I ran the game on Ultra on my setup. Looked amazing in Ultra settings. Specifically. K-Sex in the human area looked very good, as well as the place right north of that. I forget the names of them. But the 2 zones outside of Divinity's Reach looked amazing, and I'm sad I didn't play much in them. I primarily played in the Charzone. The Charzone looked good, but that area outside Divinity's Reach looked amazing. But yeah, the graphics in general of the game looked really, really good. I also like some of the Norn areas looked pretty good as well. Like the Wyvern Foothills or whatever they're called. Looks pretty good. So artistically the game looks, I think, great. One of the best MMOs out there. It's not the best looking of MMOs out there. I think that would go towards Final Fantasy XIV. But in terms of the amount of life, like the environments look like they were made like they were characters. Like there's a lot of detail put into each environment. You're not seeing any copy pasted material. Everything is different. I mean, I remember seeing I remember seeing a video where this guy was just like, there's like 20 beds lined up one after another, and in any other MMO those beds would have been copy pasted one another, but they were all different. Like each bed was different, so like they don't really use copy pasted material unless it's like a post, like a signpost. But even then, it's something different. Like there's something different about it. So each of the there's no copy paste content. Each zone looks amazing. From the zones we went in, I went into every zone but the Norn 25 to 30 zone, and I haven't, or 15 to 25 zone, and I haven't gotten into any of the dungeons yet, or found any of the jumping puzzles yet. But all the open world areas looked really, really good, as well as the cities. Everything looked very good. Now, on the flip side, the game needs to be more optimized. It only used about 30% of my CPU and about 40% of my graphics card, and as a result, the game ran at only like 15 FPS most of the time. At best, it hit 32 FPS, but then it capped at 32 FPS. It never went higher than 32 FPS unless it was in a cutscene. So it was like something was bottlenecking it, but my card and GPU, or my GPU and CPU were not even hitting peak performance. Like, they were barely being used. So it was very weird what was happening with the graphics and optimization. And so some of this video you're seeing in the background, my video, drops down to 3 FPS. And it's not because I have a bad video card. I have an AMD Phenom 2 X4 Black Edition CPU, which is a quad-core 3.4 GHz AMD CPU. On top of that, my video card is an AMD Radeon HD 5870 1GB. I have a really good machine. It's not the best, but it's a really good machine nonetheless. I'll run Crysis 1 at 1080p and get 40 FPS with every setting maxed, right? And even 2x anti-aliasing. Actually, I think I can do that with 4x anti-aliasing, now that I recall. My computer handles modern games really well, and this game it bottlenecked. It ran really bad, and especially when you got into these big dynamic events, like a lot of people were hating the Shaman event, the infamous Char Shaman event, because the Shaman's so hard to kill. And I think the big reason why the Shaman's so hard to kill is because it requires a lot of people to kill it, but B, the FPS drops so dramatically that you can't really use any of your skills effectively against the Shaman. So it's like, a double-edged sword there. But yeah, the game needs some optimization in the graphics, but it looks beautiful. So hopefully they do some optimization that's there. Moving on to sound. The sound effects, every sound effect was really good. I really like some of the sound effects when you're throwing axes. It creates like a little whirling sound in the background. Sounds very cool. They're not as unique as the sound effects in Guild Wars 1, in my opinion. Like, those are some very distinct, unique sound effects, but they're still very good sound effects nonetheless. That's about all I can really talk about those. The music, on the other hand, is simply amazing. The only other MMO that came out recently with great music, in my opinion, was Final Fantasy XIV. Had some really good music to it. And I think Guild Wars 2 tops it. So I would say Guild Wars 2 is probably going to go on one of my top 5 MMOs of best music out there. Number 1 would probably have to be Guild Wars 1. Guild Wars 2 would probably be number 2. Sword of the New World's probably 3, and Final Fantasy XIV is number 4. I don't know what 5 is yet, but off the top of my head, that's how I would rate it. I think Guild Wars 1 still beats it in music, but the music is still very good. But yeah, that about wraps it up. Overall, the game was a really good beta. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Very happy that I actually did a pre-order in the game. I'm not just hyping it up at this point in time, like a lot of people were saying, well, it's just hype. It'll end up being a bad game. From what I experienced, it was fun. And from my experience with Guild Wars 1, I have no doubt the game will be this thoroughly fun at level 80. So, Guild Wars 1 was same experience all the way through, all the way up into the end game, and I have no doubt that Guild Wars 2 will be, just like that. So that is hype right there, but from my personal experience, I had a fun 24 hours or whatever I played. And from general experience in Guild Wars 1, first 24 hours in Guild Wars 1 is exactly the same as, 2,400 hours later on, It's the same game, same fun. I can't wait till we actually get to see more content. I'm really looking forward to launch now. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the video.
PETA's gonna get pissed at us for doing this.
Fuck 'em.